I pulled my old pickup truck into the gravel driveway and slammed on the brakes. A massive yellow bulldozer was parked directly on top of my mother's prize rose garden. It was crushing the delicate pink bushes I had spent the entire humid summer pruning and saving from beetles. Standing next to the machine was my brother Justin. I had not seen him in 3 years since he left town 5 minutes after our father's funeral. He was wearing a silver Italian suit that shimmered in the late afternoon sun, and he was holding a crystal glass of champagne. He looked clean and expensive while I was covered in sawdust and sweat from a 12-hour shift at the restoration workshop. He saw me get out of the truck. He did not smile. He did not come over to hug me. He just pointed a manicured finger at the bulldozer and shouted over the idling engine. "You're right on time, Tessa. Go inside and pack your things because I just sold this dump to the Silver Lake Group and they need the land cleared by Monday morning." I want you to pause for a second. Imagine working 18 hours a day to pay off a mortgage for your family home. Then imagine your sibling showing up after years of silence to tell you he sold it all for quick cash without even asking you. What would you do in that moment? Let me know in the comments below. I stood there frozen in the driveway while the dust from the bulldozer coated my tongue, the metallic taste mixed with the sudden bow rising in my throat. This was not just a house. This was the legacy of 3 generations of carpenters and woodworkers. The house sat on a bluff overlooking the lake, a sprawling Victorian beauty with a wraparound porch that my father had built with his own hands. Every shingle and every floorboard held a memory of my parents. Since they passed away, I had dedicated every waking moment to saving it. I was 32 years old, but my hands looked like the hands of a woman of 50. My knuckles were swollen from sanding walnut and cherry wood all day. My back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache that never really went away. I had sacrificed my social life and my savings and my sleep to keep the bank from taking this property. Justin walked toward me across the crushed roses. The smell of his expensive cologne hit me before he did. It was a sharp, musky scent that smelled like money and arrogance. He stopped 3 feet away from me as if he was afraid my poverty might be contagious. He took a sip of his champagne and looked at my work boots, which were held together with duct tape. He shook his head with a look of mock pity. "Look at you, Tessa. You look like a peasant. I am doing you a favor, honestly. This place is a money pit and you are drowning in it." I finally found my voice. It came out raspy and low. "You cannot sell this house, Justin. It belongs to both of us. Mom wanted us to keep it in the family. That is why I have been paying the mortgage alone for 3 years. Where were you when the roof leaked last winter? Where were you when the property taxes were due?" Justin laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "I was in Los Angeles building an empire, Tessa. I am an angel investor now. I deal in millions while you worry about pennies. And regarding the house, I checked the deed. We are tenants in common. That means I own 50% of this asset. And since we cannot agree on the disposition of the asset, I have the legal right to force a partition sale. I have already signed the papers with the developers." A black luxury SUV with tinted windows pulled up the driveway behind my truck. The door opened and a woman stepped out. She was stunning in a plastic manufactured way. She had long blonde extensions and was wearing 6-inch stiletto heels that sank into the soft dirt of the yard. She wore a white dress that looked like it cost more than my truck. This was Hailey. I had seen her on Justin's Instagram feed where they posted photos of their vacations in Dubai and Paris. She looked around the yard with a sneer on her perfectly painted lips. "Babe," she called out to Justin, her voice high and grating. "Is this it? Is this the estate? It looks much smaller than you said. And it smells like wet dog out here." Justin turned to her and his face transformed instantly. The coldness vanished and was replaced by a sycophantic smile. "It is just the rustic charm, Hailey. Once Silver Lake levels it, they are going to build a 5-star wellness resort. Imagine the view from the infinity pool right where that rotting porch is standing." Hailey walked over to us, carefully avoiding the oil stains on the driveway. She didn't look at me. She looked through me. She took Justin's arm and whispered loudly, "Did you give her the check yet? We need to get back to the city for our dinner reservation at Nobu." Justin reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a check and flicked it toward me. It fluttered in the wind and landed in the dirt at my feet. I stared at it. It was a cashier's check for $50,000. "There is your share, Tessa. Justin said casually. The developers paid $3 million for the land. But I had to deduct the outstanding mortgage and the liens and the legal fees and of course my management fee for brokering the deal. $50,000 is more money than you have ever seen in your life. Take it and go buy yourself a condo in the bad part of town. Or buy some new boots. I looked down at the check lying in the dust. $50,000. The land alone was appraised at $4 million last year. The timber on the back 40 acres was worth another $500,000. He was stealing from me. He was robbing me blind in broad daylight and smiling about it. He wasn't an angel investor. I knew enough about business from running the restoration shop to know that wealthy people don't sell prime real estate for pennies on the dollar unless they are desperate. I looked up at him. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool breeze off the lake. I saw the way his hand trembled slightly when he lifted the champagne glass. I saw the way he kept glancing at his phone as if he was expecting a terrifying phone call. He was afraid. I stepped forward. I did not pick up the check. I stepped right over it and ground it into the dirt with my heavy work boot. I am not going anywhere, Justin. I said. My voice was steady now. This is my home. I have rights. You cannot just bulldoze my life because you decided to show up after 3 years. Justin's face turned red. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. His eyes narrowed into slits. Listen to me, you stubborn little cow. The deal is done. The papers are signed. Silver Lake has already transferred the deposit. If you are not out of here by Monday, I will have the sheriff throw you out. I will have your precious workshop condemned. I will burn your furniture in the front yard. Do not test me, Tessa. I need this deal to close. Why do you need it to close so badly, Justin? I asked quietly. He flinched. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped and I saw pure panic in his eyes. Then the mask was back. Because I am a businessman, Tessa. And this is business. Now get out of my sight. Hailey and I are taking the master suite. Try not to make too much noise while you're packing. He turned and walked toward the house with Hailey clinging to his arm. They walked up the steps to the porch my father built. They opened the front door that I had just refinished last month. They walked into my sanctuary and slammed the door shut. I stood alone in the driveway as the sun began to set behind the trees. The bulldozer driver climbed down from his cab and lit a cigarette. He looked at me with a mixture of boredom and sympathy. Sorry, lady, he grunted. Just doing my job. Boss says we start clearing the trees on the South Ridge Monday at 7 sharp. I looked at the South Ridge. That was where the ancient oak trees stood. That was where the eagles nested every spring. That was the heart of the property. My heart was pounding in my chest like a trapped bird. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to run into the house and drag them out by their designer clothes. But I didn't. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth and impending rain. It was the smell of home. I looked at the crushed roses under the tracks of the bulldozer. They were broken, but the roots were still deep in the soil. They would grow back if they were given a chance. Justin thought he had one. He thought he held all the cards because he had a suit and a lawyer and a checkbook. He thought I was just a dumb carpenter who didn't understand the world. But he had forgotten one thing. He had forgotten that I was the one who went through Mom's papers when she died. I was the one who sat with old Mr. Abernathy, the family lawyer, when we updated the deed. I was the one who knew the secrets of this land. I walked over to the bulldozer and ran my hand along the cold yellow metal of the blade. Justin had made a fatal mistake. He had sold the land to a developer who wanted to build a resort. He had promised them clear title and development rights. But he hadn't checked the county records. He didn't know about the conservation easement. I turned and looked at the house where the lights were flickering on in the master bedroom. I could see their shadows moving across the window. They were celebrating. Let them drink their champagne. Let them believe they were kings of the world for a few days. Because come Monday morning when that bulldozer tried to touch the first tree on the South Ridge, they were going to trigger a legal landmine that would blow their entire world apart. I picked up my tool bag from the back of my truck. It was heavy and comforting in my hand. I wasn't going to pack. I was going to dig in. I walked toward the small guest cottage at the edge of the woods where I would sleep tonight. As I walked, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I dialed a number I hadn't called in a long time. It rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Abernathy," I said. "It is Tessa. Justin is back. And he brought a bulldozer." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then I heard the sound of a heavy book being opened. "Is he now?" Mr. Abernathy said. "Did he check the easement?" "No," I said, watching the silhouette of my brother in the window. "He thinks he sold it to Silver Lake for a resort." Mr. Abernathy let out a low, dry chuckle. It sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "Well then, Tessa, it seems your brother has just sold them a bridge to nowhere. Do not say a word to him. Let him dig his hole a little deeper. I will see you on Monday." I hung up the phone. The fear was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard anger. I looked at the bulldozer one last time. "You are not tearing down anything," I whispered to the machine. "You are just the first piece of evidence." The guest cottage was not really a cottage. It was a converted potting shed that my father had insulated with fiberglass and plywood back in the 90s. It had a single cold water tap and a small wood stove, but no bathroom and no kitchen. I dragged my mattress from the main house and threw it on the concrete floor. The air inside smelled of gasoline and damp fertilizer. Through the single dirty window, I could see the main house glowing like a cruise ship in the dark. Every light was on. I could see shadows moving in the kitchen. I could see Justin opening another bottle of wine. I could see Hailey dancing in the living room, twirling around in my mother's favorite armchair. I laid there in the dark, listening to the bass of their music, thumping through the walls of my sanctuary. It was a heavy electronic beat that seemed to shake the ground. I pulled my old sleeping bag up to my chin and tried to block it out. I told myself it was only for 2 days. Mr. Abernathy had said to let them dig their hole. But as the temperature dropped and my breath turned into white plumes in the cold air, I realized that 2 days could feel like a lifetime when you are watching your life being dismantled. The next morning I woke up stiff and aching. The sun was barely up, but I had work to do. I had a deadline for a client in the city. A set of 6 mahogany dining chairs from the 1800s that needed to be stripped and French polished. I walked up to the main house to use the bathroom and get some hot water. The back door was locked. My key did not turn. I jiggled the handle thinking it was just stuck, but then I saw the shiny new brass deadbolt. Justin had changed the locks. I knocked on the glass. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Finally, Hailey appeared in the kitchen. She was wearing a silk kimono and a sleep mask pushed up on her forehead. She looked at me through the glass with confused irritation. She unlocked the door but did not open it for me. She just turned around and walked back to the coffee machine. I stepped inside. The kitchen was a disaster zone. There were empty wine bottles on the counter. There were takeout containers from a sushi place 2 towns over scattered on the floor. A greasy slice of pizza was sitting directly on the antique butcher block island, leaving a dark oil stain on the wood. My heart clenched. I grabbed a rag and started to wipe it up instinctively. Hailey watched me while sipping her espresso. "You are up early, Tessa," she said. Her voice was raspy with sleep. "Since you are already cleaning, can you do something about the bathroom upstairs? The shower drain is clogged with hair. It is disgusting. And Justin wants breakfast. He likes his eggs poached, not fried. Do not overcook them like you did the steak last night." I stopped wiping the counter. I looked at her. "I am not your maid, Hailey," I said. "I am here to get my tools and use the bathroom." Hailey laughed. It was a light tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, honey. You are living on our property rent-free until Monday. The least you can do is earn your keep. Justin says you are good with your hands. So make yourself useful. Or you can go use the hose outside." I walked past her. I went upstairs to the bathroom. My towels were gone. In their place were fluffy white towels with the Silver Lake logo embroidered on them. My toothbrush was in the trash can. My face cream was in the trash can. Even the little porcelain dish where I kept my rings was gone. I washed my face with cold water and dried it with toilet paper. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed. My skin was pale. I looked like a ghost haunting my own home. When I came back downstairs, Justin was at the kitchen table. He was on a video call. He was wearing a fresh white shirt and looking professional and charming. "Yes, the demolition crew is scheduled for 7. He was saying to the screen. The site will be clear. We are removing the old structures to maximize the lake view. It is going to be spectacular. He saw me and muted the call. He didn't look up from his laptop. Tessa, he said, I need you to move your truck. It is blocking the driveway. The stagers are coming at noon to prep the house for a final walkthrough with the investors. And get that junk out of the barn. I promised them the barn would be empty. That junk is my livelihood, Justin. I said. Those are client pieces. I have nowhere to put them. Not my problem. He said, unmuting his microphone. Sorry about that, just dealing with some personnel issues. I spent the rest of the day in a state of frantic exhaustion. I had to move 3 heavy workbenches and piles of lumber out of the barn and cover them with tarps behind the shed. My back screamed in protest. Every time I lifted a heavy box, I felt a sharp line of fire shoot down my spine. Justin and Hailey watched from the porch. They were drinking mimosas. They pointed and laughed when I tripped over a root and dropped a box of tools. Look at her. I heard Justin say. She is like a mule. Strong back, weak mind. That is why she is still stuck in this town. Hailey giggled. She is kind of pathetic. Do you think she knows we are going to burn the barn down anyway for the insurance money before the demo? I froze. Burn it down. They were planning to commit insurance fraud on top of everything else. I kept my head down. I kept moving. I was not a mule. I was a vault. I was storing every insult and every threat in the archive of my mind. By late afternoon, the stagers arrived. They were a team of young, energetic people who swept through the house like locusts. They carried out my parents' furniture. The velvet sofa where my father proposed to my mother. The oak dining table where we had eaten every Christmas dinner for 30 years. They carried them out and dumped them in a pile on the front lawn next to a rented dumpster. I ran over. What are you doing? I screamed. The lead stager, a woman with a clipboard, looked at me. Mr. Thorne ordered a full clear-out. He said, this stuff is garbage. We are replacing it with modern minimalist rental furniture. It photographs better. I saw them dragging my mother's quilt chest across the gravel. The wood scratched with a sickening sound. I ran to it and wrapped my arms around it. No. I said. You cannot take this. Justin walked down the steps. He looked annoyed. Tessa, stop making a scene. It is just old wood. It smells like mothballs. Let it go. It is Mom's chest. I said, my voice breaking. Her wedding dress is in here. Justin sighed. He pulled out his wallet and took out $200. Here, he said, throwing the bills at me. That is more than it is worth. Buy a new box. Now get out of the way. I looked at the money on the ground. I looked at the pile of my family's history being treated like trash. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to pick up a hammer and smash his perfect teeth. But then I saw the black SUV of the Silver Lake executives pulling up the long driveway. Mr. Abernathy's voice echoed in my head. Let them dig. I stood up. I picked up the quilt chest. It was heavy, solid oak filled with linens. I lifted it by myself. My muscles trembled. I carried it step by agonizing step past Justin, past Hailey, past the stagers, all the way to the shed. I put it down in the corner. Then I went back for the photo albums. Then the rocking chair. I spent 4 hours hauling my life across the yard while they watched. By the time I was done, it was dark. The house was transformed. It was full of white beige furniture and abstract art that meant nothing. It looked like a hotel lobby. It was cold and soulless. That night they threw a party. It was a celebration for the closing of the deal. Cars lined the driveway. I recognized some people from high school, people who used to be my friends but who now looked at me with pity or ignored me completely. They were attracted to Justin's money like moths to a flame. I sat in the dark shed polishing the mahogany chair by the light of a single battery-powered lantern. I could hear the music. I could hear the laughter. Suddenly the shed door banged open. It was Justin. He was drunk. His tie was loose and his eyes were glassy. He stumbled in holding a bottle of whiskey. Look at you. He slurred, leaning against the doorframe. The little woodworm in her hole. You know, Tessa, I almost feel bad for you. Almost. Go away, Justin. I said, not looking up from my polishing. He stepped closer. He kicked the leg of the chair I was working on. It was a delicate clawfoot. It snapped. I gasped. I dropped my rag. Justin. He laughed. Oops. Clumsy me. You know why Dad left the business to you, Tessa? Because he knew you couldn't do anything else. He knew you were too scared to leave. He knew you were weak. He told me that. He said Justin has wings, but Tessa has roots. And roots are just things that keep you stuck in the dirt. He was lying. I knew he was lying. Dad never said that. Dad loved the wood. Dad loved the roots. But the words still stung. They found the insecure part of my heart and twisted the knife. Justin took a swig of whiskey. Enjoy your last night, Tessa. Tomorrow the bulldozers finish the job. And you will be nothing. Just a memory. Like this shed. He turned and stumbled out, leaving the door wide open. The cold wind rushed in. I looked at the broken chair leg. It was a clean break. It could be fixed. It would take hours of careful gluing and clamping, but it could be fixed. I picked up the piece of wood. I held it tight. I did not cry. I was done crying. Justin thought he had broken me. He thought he had won. But he had just given me the last thing I needed. He had shown me that there was nothing left to save in him. There was no brother left. Just a monster in a suit. I walked to the door and closed it. I locked it. I went back to my work. I fixed the chair. I worked through the night. I sanded. I glued. I polished. The rhythm of the work calmed me. It reminded me of who I was. I was not a victim. I was a fixer. I was a builder. And tomorrow morning, I was going to dismantle Justin's life with the same precision I used to restore this chair. I watched the sun come up over the lake. It was Monday. The sky was a bruised purple. I heard the rumble of heavy engines in the distance. The demolition crew was early. I put down my sandpaper. I stood up and brushed the dust off my clothes. I put on my best work shirt. I put on my steel-toed boots. I grabbed the folder of documents Mr. Abernathy had given me 3 years ago. It was time. The morning sun did not bring warmth. It brought a harsh gray light that exposed the mud and the destruction in the yard. The bulldozer engine rumbled to life at 7 sharp, just as the driver had promised. The sound vibrated through the floorboards of the guest shed and rattled the tools on my workbench. I drank my cold coffee and watched through the window. Justin was standing on the porch in a bathrobe, screaming into his phone. He was waving his arms frantically. Hailey was standing behind him, wrapped in a blanket, looking pale and hungover. Something was wrong. The bulldozer was running, but it was not moving toward the south ridge. A black sedan had pulled up and a man in a hard hat was talking to the driver. Justin ran down the steps, almost tripping over his own feet. I saw him arguing with the man in the hard hat. I saw him point at the house, then point at the woods. I saw him pull a wad of cash out of his pocket and try to shove it into the man's hand. The man stepped back and shook his head, crossing his arms. I knew this was my chance. While Justin was distracted by the demolition crew, and Hailey was busy nursing her headache inside, I could slip into the main house. I needed to know exactly what he had promised Silver Lake. I needed to know how deep the lie went. Mr. Abernathy had told me to let him dig his hole, but I needed to measure the depth of the grave. I waited until Justin walked the foreman toward the edge of the property, still arguing loudly. I sprinted across the wet grass, keeping low behind the hedges. I reached the back door. It was unlocked. I slipped inside. The kitchen smelled of stale champagne and expensive perfume. I moved silent as a cat through the hallway, avoiding the floorboards I knew would creak. I went straight to my father's old study. This was where Justin had set up his command center. The heavy oak door was ajar. I pushed it open. The room was a mess. Papers were scattered everywhere. Takeout boxes piled up on the leather sofa. And there on the desk sat his laptop, open and glowing. I walked over to it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I expected it to be locked, but Justin was arrogant. He never thought anyone in this house was smart enough to touch his technology. The screen was active. He was logged into his email and several trading platforms. I sat down in my father's chair. It still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and sawdust. I started to read. The first thing I saw was a trading dashboard. It was a sea of red. Numbers flashed and dropped. -40%. -60%. Margin call warnings were flashing in the corner like emergency strobes. I clicked on the account summary. The balance was negative. Not just a little negative. It was negative $400,000. I gasped. He wasn't just broke. He was underwater. He was drowning. Then I opened his email. The inbox was a horror show. There were dozens of emails from a collection agency called Titan Recovery. The subject lines were in all caps. Urgent payment required. Final notice. Legal action imminent. But it was the email from 3 days ago that made my blood run cold. It was from a sender named simply the Chin. The subject line was empty. The body of the email was a single photo. It was a picture of Hailey walking out of a yoga studio in Los Angeles, taken from a car. Below the photo was a short message. Nice fiancé, Justin. Would be a shame if she had an accident before the wedding. We want the full amount by Tuesday. Or we collect in other ways. Tuesday. That was tomorrow. My hand flew to my mouth. He wasn't selling the house to build a resort. He wasn't investing. He was selling the house to pay off a loan shark who was threatening to hurt Hailey. He was liquidating our family legacy to save his own skin from criminals he had gotten into bed with. I clicked on the sent folder. I needed to see what he had told Silver Lake. I found an email chain with the subject Silver Lake Acquisition Contract Final. I opened the attachment. It was a 50-page document. I scrolled through the legal jargon until I found the section on warranties and representations. Clause 14. Title and encumbrances. Seller warrants that the property is free and clear of all liens, easements, restrictions, and encroachments. Seller warrants that the property is zoned for commercial development and that there are no conservation restrictions that would prevent the buyer's intended use as a luxury resort. He had lied. He had signed his name to a lie. He had explicitly stated there were no easements. I scrolled down to the payment terms. Clause 4. Deposit. Upon execution of this agreement, buyer shall wire a non-refundable deposit of $500,000 to seller's designated account. $500,000. Where was it? I went back to his browser tabs. I found his bank account. I clicked on the transaction history. A deposit of $500,000 from Silver Lake Group had hit the account on Friday, and yesterday a wire transfer of $450,000 had gone out to an account in the Cayman Islands. He had already spent it. He had sent the money to the loan shark. I sat back in the chair. The room spun. The magnitude of his deception was breathtaking. He had taken $500,000 for a house he couldn't legally sell for development, and he had already sent the money to criminals who would never give it back. When Silver Lake found out about the easement, they would demand their deposit back. And Justin wouldn't have it. He would be facing fraud charges from the developer and violence from the loan shark. He had trapped himself in a vice, and he was trying to use me as the grease to slide out. Suddenly, the front door slammed. I froze. Voices in the hallway. Justin and the foreman. You listen to me. Justin was shouting. I don't care about the mud. I don't care about the union regulations. I am paying you double time. Put that blade in the ground and start knocking down the trees. No. But Mr. Thorne. The foreman's voice was calm but firm. We can't start until the site is secured. There is a woman living in the shed. Liability. She is leaving. Justin screamed. She is packing right now. Just start on the other side. Start on the ridge. I looked around the room. I needed proof. I pulled out my phone and started snapping photos of the screen. The negative balance. The threat from the Chin. The wire transfer to the Caymans. The clause in the contract. I took pictures of everything. My hands were shaking, but the images were clear. I heard heavy footsteps approaching the study. Justin. Hailey's voice whined from the living room. Where are my sunglasses? I can't find my Pradas. Check the study. Justin yelled back. I think I left them on the desk. I dove under the heavy oak desk just as the door swung open. I curled into a ball, pressing myself against the back panel. I held my breath. I could see Hailey's bare feet and the hem of her silk robe. She walked to the desk. She paused. That is weird. She muttered. Why is his laptop open? She moved the mouse. I heard the click of keys. She was looking at something. Oh my God. She whispered. She had seen it. She had seen the bank balance. Or maybe the email from the chin. Hailey. Justin's voice called from the hall. Did you find them? Hailey stood there for a long moment. I could hear her breathing fast. She didn't say anything. Then she cleared her throat. No. She called back. They aren't here. I will check the car. She turned and walked out quickly. She didn't close the laptop. She didn't close the door. She knew. She knew he was broke. And she didn't tell him she knew. She was planning her own exit strategy. I waited until I heard the front door close again. I scrambled out from under the desk. I checked the laptop one last time to make sure I hadn't left any traces. Then I slipped out the window. It was a tight squeeze, but I managed to drop into the flower bed outside without breaking my neck. I ran back to the shed, my heart pounding like a drum. I locked the door behind me and sank onto the mattress. I looked at the photos on my phone. I had the smoking gun. I had the ammunition to destroy him completely. But then a wave of sadness hit me. It wasn't for the house. It wasn't for the money. It was for the little boy who used to help me catch fireflies in the backyard. The brother who used to share his candy with me. That boy was dead. He had been eaten alive by greed and fear. The man in the silver suit was a stranger. A dangerous, desperate stranger who would burn us all down to save himself. My phone buzzed. It was Mr. Abernathy. Tessa. His voice was gravel. The county clerk just called me. Silver Lake's lawyers are doing a final title scrub this morning. They are going to see the easement in about an hour. They are going to be calling your brother very soon. He knows. I whispered. Mr. Abernathy, he already spent the deposit. He sent it to a loan shark. If the deal falls through, he goes to jail or worse. Mr. Abernathy was silent for a moment. Then he sighed. A heavy, weary sound. Then he has made his bed. And now he must lie in it. Do not interfere, Tessa. Stay in the shed. Let the law do its work. I hung up. I looked out the window. The bulldozer was moving again. It was turning toward the south ridge. The driver had given in. The blade was lifting, ready to tear into the earth. I stood up. I couldn't just stay in the shed. That was my father's ridge. That was my mother's land. I wasn't going to let them destroy even one blade of grass while the lawyers filed their paperwork. I grabbed my tool bag. I grabbed the folder with the original easement deed, and I grabbed a heavy iron crowbar. I opened the shed door. The wind whipped my hair across my face. Justin was standing on the porch watching the bulldozer with a look of triumphant desperation. He thought he had beaten the clock. I started walking toward the ridge. I walked past the crushed roses. I walked past the empty barn. I walked straight toward the yellow machine that was roaring like a beast. Hey! Justin screamed, seeing me. Hey, get out of there. You crazy witch, get out of the way. I didn't stop. I walked until I was standing directly in the path of the blade. I planted my feet. I held up the folder in one hand and the crowbar in the other. The driver slammed on the brakes. The machine lurched to a halt just 5 feet from me. The blade hovered in the air, dripping mud. Justin ran toward me, his face purple with rage. Move. He shrieked. Move or I will bury you right here. I looked him in the eye. I saw the fear behind the rage. I saw the lone shark in his shadow. I saw the end of his world coming. No, Justin. I said loud enough to be heard over the engine. The digging stops here. I stood my ground in the mud. The massive blade of the bulldozer hovered inches from my chest. The heat from the engine was suffocating. The driver looked down at me with wide eyes. He killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. Justin ran up to me. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. His expensive shoes were ruined in the muck. He grabbed my arm and dug his fingers into my bicep. What are you doing? He hissed. Spittle flew from his mouth, landing on my cheek. Are you trying to get killed? Get out of the way, Tessa. They need to clear the ridge today. I pulled my arm away. I felt a bruise forming already. No, Justin. I said. Mom loved these trees. Dad planted that oak on the ridge the day I was born. You are not touching it. Justin laughed. It was a manic, broken sound. A tree. You are risking a $3 million deal for a tree. You are insane. Do you know what I can do with $3 million? Do you know what kind of life we could have? I looked at him. I saw the tremor in his hands. I saw the way his eyes darted to the black SUV parked at the top of the driveway where the Silver Lake lawyers were waiting. I know about the debt, Justin. I said quietly. I know about the margin calls. I know about the chin. And I know you already spent the deposit. The color drained from his face instantly. He looked like a corpse. He stepped back as if I had slapped him. You. He stammered. How do you? I know everything. I said, stepping closer. I know you are not selling this house for us. You are selling it to save your own life. And you lied to the developers. You told them the land was clean. Justin looked around wildly. He saw the construction crew watching. He saw Hailey watching from the porch. He saw his entire house of cards trembling in the wind. Desperation took over. His eyes went hard and dark. It doesn't matter what you know. He whispered. The deal is signed. I have power of attorney. I have the deed. And I am not letting a sentimental woodworker stop me from surviving. He turned to the foreman. Get the chainsaw. He shouted. If the dozer can't run because of liability, I will cut it down myself. Give me the chainsaw. The foreman hesitated. Mr. Thorne, I don't think. Give it to me. Justin screamed. His voice cracked. He ran to the truck bed and grabbed a heavy orange chainsaw. He yanked the starter cord. The machine roared to life. The sound was like a scream tearing through the morning air. Justin walked toward the ridge, toward the ancient oak tree that stood alone against the sky. It was 300 years old. My father had built a swing on its lowest branch. My mother's ashes were scattered at its roots. No. I screamed. I ran after him. Justin, stop. He didn't stop. He walked with a terrifying purpose. He reached the tree. He revved the engine. I grabbed his shoulder. Don't do this. I begged. Please, Justin. That is Mom's tree. He shoved me. He didn't just push me away. He swung his elbow back and hit me square in the chest. The force knocked the wind out of me. I stumbled back and fell hard onto the wet grass. My head hit a root. Stars exploded in my vision. I laid there gasping for air. I watched through blurry eyes as my brother raised the saw. He didn't hesitate. He drove the blade into the trunk of the oak. The sound of biting wood was sickening. Sawdust sprayed into the air like blood. The tree groaned. It was a deep, mournful sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. Justin cut deeper and deeper. He was crying. Tears were streaming down his face, but he didn't stop. He was cutting away his past. He was cutting away his conscience. I tried to get up, but my ribs were on fire. I watched as the great tree began to lean. The wood cracked loud as a gunshot. Then, with a slow, graceful arc, the giant fell. It crashed to the ground with a thunderous boom that shook the earth beneath me. Branches shattered. The swing my father built was crushed instantly under the weight of the trunk. Silence returned to the ridge. The only sound was the idling of the chainsaw in Justin's hand. He stood over the fallen tree, breathing hard. He looked down at me. His eyes were empty. There was no brother left in them. There was only a survivor. See, he said, panting. It is just wood, Tessa. It is just dead wood. Now get out of my way. The lawyers are waiting for the final signature. He turned and walked back toward the house, dragging the saw behind him. I laid in the mud next to the corpse of my mother's tree. I reached out and touched the rough bark. I felt the vibration of its death fading. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't my ribs. It was the last tether of loyalty I had to him. I had tried to save the house. I had tried to save the land. I had even tried in my own way to save him from his own greed. But he didn't want to be saved. He wanted to destroy. I wiped the mud from my face. I stood up. My chest ached, but the pain made me sharp. It made me cold. Mr. Abernathy was right. Let him dig. He wanted a signature. He wanted a closing meeting. He wanted to hand over the keys and take his money and run. Fine. I picked up my phone. I texted Mr. Abernathy 3 words. Bring the deed. Then I walked back to the shed. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I walked with the slow, steady pace of an executioner walking to the gallows. I went inside. I changed my muddy shirt. I washed the blood from the cut on my forehead. I put on my clean jacket. I picked up the folder containing the conservation easement. The paper felt heavy in my hand. It was a weapon more powerful than any chainsaw. I walked out of the shed and headed toward the main house. Hailey was on the porch painting her nails. She looked at me with bored disdain. "Did you finally give up?" she asked. "Yes." I lied. My voice was flat. "Tell Justin I am ready to sign. Tell the lawyers to get the papers ready." Hailey smiled. A cruel, victorious smile. "About time," she said. "Try not to track mud on the carpet." I walked up the steps. I entered the house. The air conditioning was cold. The lawyers were sitting at the dining table. Justin was pouring scotch with a shaking hand. He looked up when I entered. He looked relieved. "You came to your senses," he said. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had just cut down our mother's memorial for cash. "Yes, Justin," I said. "Let's finish this." I walked into the dining room. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and fear. Justin was sitting at the head of the table. He had poured himself another drink. His hand was shaking so bad the amber liquid was sloshing over the rim of the glass. Hailey was sitting next to him, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. Across from them sat 3 men in dark suits. They were the legal team from Silver Lake Group. They looked like sharks in human skin. "Tessa," Justin said. His voice was tight. "You finally decided to be reasonable." I didn't answer him. I walked to the empty chair at the end of the table. I pulled it out slowly. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor with a harsh screech. Everyone winced. I sat down. I put my muddy boots up on the rung of the chair. I placed the folder I was carrying face down on the table. Mr. Sterling, the lead attorney for Silver Lake, pushed a thick stack of documents toward me. He looked at the bruise on my cheek where Justin had hit me, but he didn't ask about it. He just wanted the deal done. "Ms. Thorne," Mr. Sterling said smoothly, "we just need your signature on the final page of the transfer deed. Your brother has already executed his portion. As soon as you sign, the remaining funds will be released to the escrow account." I looked at the paper. It was the death warrant for my family home. "And the deposit?" I asked quietly. "The $500,000. That has already been paid." Mr. Sterling nodded. "Yes. That was transferred to your brother's account on Friday upon execution of the preliminary agreement." I looked at Justin. He was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. His eyes were pleading. "Just sign it, Tessa," he mouthed. "Just sign it or we are both dead." I picked up the pen. It was a heavy black fountain pen. I held it over the paper. "Are you sure about this, Justin?" I asked. "Are you sure you want to sell?" "Yes," he hissed. "Sign the damn paper." I looked at Hailey. She didn't even look up. She was checking her engagement ring in the light. I looked at Mr. Sterling. "You are buying the land for a resort." "Correct. A 5-star wellness retreat with an infinity pool and luxury cabins. That is the plan," Mr. Sterling said, checking his watch. "We break ground on Monday." I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. I lowered the pen. I signed my name. Tessa Marie Thorne. The ink was dark and permanent. Justin let out a breath that sounded like a balloon deflating. He slumped in his chair. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Done," he said. His voice was trembling with relief. "It is done. Thank God." Mr. Sterling took the paper. He checked the signature. "Excellent," he said. He pulled out his phone. "I will authorize the final wire transfer. Congratulations, Mr. Thorne. You are a wealthy man." "Wait," I said. Mr. Sterling paused, his thumb hovering over the screen. "There is just one more thing," I said. I reached for the folder I had placed on the table. "What is it now, Tessa?" Justin snapped. He was standing up, ready to celebrate. "The deal is closed. Get out." "It is a disclosure," I said. "Since I am a seller, I have a legal obligation to disclose all material facts about the property. I wouldn't want to be sued for fraud later." I slid the folder across the polished table. It stopped right in front of Mr. Sterling. Justin laughed nervously. "She is just trying to stall. It is probably some invoice for roof repairs or termite damage. Ignore her." Mr. Sterling didn't ignore me. He was a lawyer. He opened the folder. The room went silent. Mr. Sterling read the first page. His eyebrows went up. He flipped to the second page. He adjusted his glasses. He read the third page. His face went from professional indifference to stone-cold anger. He closed the folder. He placed his hand on top of it. He looked at Justin. "Mr. Thorne," Mr. Sterling said. His voice was very quiet. "Are you aware of a filing with the county recorder's office dated 3 years ago regarding a conservation easement on this property?" Justin blinked. "A what?" "A conservation easement," Mr. Sterling repeated. He tapped the folder. "This document states that the entire 40 acres of the Thorne estate was placed into a perpetual land trust for the preservation of local wildlife and forestry." "So what?" Justin said. He poured another drink. "It just means we have nice trees. You can cut them down." "I already started." "No, Mr. Thorne," Mr. Sterling said. "You cannot cut them down. That is the point of an easement. This document strictly prohibits any commercial development. It prohibits the construction of new structures. It prohibits the subdivision of the land. It prohibits the operation of any hospitality business." Justin froze. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "What are you talking about?" he whispered. I leaned forward. "Allow me to explain, Justin," I said. "Mom and I did this before she died. We wanted to make sure the land would never be turned into a strip mall or a resort. We donated the development rights to the Nature Conservancy. In exchange, we got a significant tax reduction, which is how I was able to afford the property taxes all these years." I looked at Mr. Sterling. "The land can only be used for residential purposes or light agriculture. You can live here. You can grow tomatoes. But you cannot build a resort. You cannot build a hotel. You cannot even build a parking lot." Mr. Sterling turned to Justin. His eyes were like lasers. "Mr. Thorne, in the purchase agreement, you explicitly warranted that the land was free of all encumbrances and was zoned for our intended use. You signed a statement saying you had disclosed all restrictions." "I didn't know," Justin stammered. He looked at me. His face was gray. "She didn't tell me. She set me up." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense for fraud," Mr. Sterling said. He stood up. He signaled to his colleagues. They started packing their briefcases immediately. "The deal is dead," Mr. Sterling said. "Silver Lake Group is withdrawing our offer immediately due to material breach of contract and misrepresentation." "No," Justin screamed. He grabbed Mr. Sterling's arm. "You can't." "I signed." She signed. "It is binding." "It is void," Mr. Sterling said, shaking him off. "We are not buying a nature preserve for $3 million. The appraisal value of this land with the easement is maybe $200,000. He turned to his associate. "Cancel the wire transfer. And draft a demand letter for the immediate return of the deposit." "The deposit?" Justin whispered. "Yes," Mr. Sterling said. "The $500,000. We expect it to be wired back to our account by close of business today. If not, we will file criminal charges for wire fraud and grand larceny." Justin collapsed into his chair. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He didn't have the money. I knew it. Hailey knew it. And soon Mr. Sterling would know it. "I don't have it," Justin whispered. "Excuse me?" Mr. Sterling asked. "I spent it," Justin said. His voice was a sob. "I had debts. I sent it away." Mr. Sterling stared at him for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. He didn't call the bank. He called the police. "This is Arthur Sterling," he said into the phone. "I am at 42 Oakwood Drive. I would like to report a significant financial fraud in progress." "Yes." "The suspect is on the premises." The room erupted into chaos. Justin was crying. He was begging Mr. Sterling to hang up. He was grabbing at his sleeve. I sat there and watched. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt clean. The truth was out. The lie was over. Then I looked at Hailey. She was standing by the window. She had watched the whole thing without saying a word. She looked at Justin, who was sobbing on the table. She looked at the lawyers who were calling the police. Then she looked at me. There was a flicker of respect in her eyes. Or maybe fear. She picked up her purse. It was a limited edition Birkin bag. She walked over to Justin. "Babe," she said softly. Justin looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. "Hailey, you have to help me. Call your father. He can fix this. He has money. Please." Hailey sighed. She reached down and patted his cheek. "My father doesn't like losers, Justin," she said. "And he really hates criminals." She took the engagement ring off her finger. It was a massive diamond. Probably bought with credit card debt. She dropped it into his whiskey glass. It made a small clinking sound. "I think we are done," she said. "Hailey, wait." Justin screamed. "You can't leave me. Not now. The chin is going to kill me." "Who is the chin?" Mr. Sterling asked, looking up from his phone. Hailey didn't answer. She walked to the door. She passed me. "Nice move," she whispered. Then she was gone. I heard the roar of the black SUV starting up outside. She was taking the car. Justin was alone. He was sitting in the wreckage of his life. The lawyers were blocking the door, waiting for the police. The loan sharks were waiting for their money. And the house was still standing. I stood up. I picked up my folder. "Where are you going?" Justin asked. He looked like a child. A scared, broken child. "I am going to check on the trees," I said. "But you signed." He whispered. "You signed the paper." I nodded. "I did. I signed my half. But since the buyer backed out, my signature is worthless. The house is still ours, Justin. Well, at least until the bank forecloses on your half to pay your legal fees. But don't worry. I will be there to buy it back at the auction." I walked to the door. "Tessa," he called out. "Help me. Please. I am your brother." I stopped. I turned around. I looked at the man who had called me a peasant. The man who had cut down my mother's tree. The man who had tried to sell my life to save his own. I looked at the bruise on my arm where he had grabbed me. "I don't have a brother," I said. "My brother died 3 years ago. You are just a trespasser." I walked out onto the porch. The sun was setting. The air was cool. The bulldozer sat silent in the yard. The lawyers were inside. The police sirens were wailing in the distance, getting closer. I walked down the steps. I walked past the crushed roses. I walked to the south ridge. The great oak tree was lying on its side. It was a tragedy. But as I looked closer, I saw something. At the base of the shattered trunk, nestled in the disturbed earth, there was a small green shoot. A sapling. Growing from the deep roots that Justin hadn't been able to reach. I knelt down. I touched the small green leaf. "We are still here," I whispered. "And we are not going anywhere." The red and blue lights of the police cruisers flashed against the white siding of the house. It was a rhythmic pulse that illuminated the damage Justin had done. The neighbors had gathered at the end of the driveway. They stood in small clusters, whispering and pointing. They had seen the bulldozer. They had heard the chainsaw. And now they were watching the prodigal son being led away in handcuffs. Justin did not go quietly. He was screaming as the officers guided him into the back of the squad car. He was screaming about his rights. He was screaming about his lawyer. But mostly he was screaming at me. "You did this, Tessa." He yelled, his face pressed against the window. "You ruined everything. You are jealous. You are nothing. I will come back. I will come back and burn it all down." I stood on the porch and watched him. I didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't feel anger. I just felt a profound exhaustion. He was right about one thing. I had ruined his plans. But I hadn't ruined him. He had done that all by himself the moment he decided that money was more important than blood. Mr. Sterling stood next to me. He looked shaken. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the weary look of a man who had just witnessed a tragedy. "I am sorry, Ms. Thorne," he said quietly. "We had no idea about the fraud. Or the coercion. We will be cooperating fully with the district attorney." "What about the house?" I asked. Mr. Sterling sighed. He looked at the paperwork in his hand. "The sale is void. The contract was based on fraudulent misrepresentation. We are rescinding our offer and demanding the immediate return of the deposit, since your brother has spent the funds. We will be placing a lien on his 50% share of the property, so the bank takes it," I said. "Eventually," Mr. Sterling said, "there will be a foreclosure auction to satisfy the debt. But given the conservation easement and the restrictions on development, I doubt there will be many bidders. The land is essentially worthless to a developer now." He handed me a card. "If I were you, Ms. Thorne, I would start saving. You might be able to buy his share for pennies on the dollar." I watched his black SUV drive away, following the police car. The driveway was empty. The yard was silent. The only sound was the wind rustling through the leaves of the fallen oak tree. I walked inside. The house was a wreck. The stagers had left their modern furniture, but it looked alien and cold. I walked through the living room, past the white sofas and the abstract art. I went to the kitchen. I picked up the whiskey glass Justin had been drinking from. Hailey's diamond ring was still inside, clinking against the glass. I fished it out. It was heavy. It was fake. I could tell by the setting. It was a high-quality cubic zirconia, not a diamond. Just another lie and a life built on them. I left it on the counter. I went out to the shed. I didn't sleep there that night. I spent the night moving my things back into the main house. I dragged my mattress back up the stairs. I carried the quilt chest back to the foot of my bed. I put my parents' photos back on the mantel. It took me all night. My muscles screamed. My bruise throbbed. But I didn't stop until every trace of Justin and Hailey was gone. The next few months were a blur of legal battles and hard work. Justin was denied bail. The flight risk was too high given his offshore accounts and his connections to organized crime. The investigation revealed a Ponzi scheme that went deeper than just the loan sharks. He had defrauded investors in 3 states. He was looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. I visited him once. It was 3 weeks after the arrest. He looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit. The expensive haircut was gone, replaced by a buzz cut. He wouldn't look at me. "Why did you come?" he asked, staring at the metal table. "To gloat." "No," I said. "I came to tell you that I am fixing the chair." "What chair?" "The one you broke," I said. "The clawfoot mahogany chair. I glued it. I sanded it. It is stronger now than it was before." He laughed bitterly. "You and your wood. You always loved things more than people." "I loved you, Justin," I said. "I loved you enough to pay your way for years. I loved you enough to let you stay in my house. But you didn't want love. You wanted fuel. And I am done burning myself to keep you warm." He looked up then. His eyes were wet. The chin found me. He whispered, "In here. I have to pay protection money, Tessa. I need cash. Please. Just sell the timber. Just sell the back 40. I stood up. I walked to the door. "Goodbye, Justin," I said. I never went back. 6 months later, the foreclosure auction was held on the steps of the county courthouse. It was a rainy Tuesday. I stood there in my rain jacket holding a certified check. Mr. Abernathy stood next to me holding an umbrella. There were no other bidders. The conservation easement had done its job. No developer wanted a piece of land they couldn't exploit. The bank opened the bidding at the value of the debt plus fees. $120,000. The auctioneer called out. I raised my hand. "Going once. Going twice. Sold to Ms. Tessa Thorne." Mr. Abernathy squeezed my shoulder. "It is done, Tessa. It is all yours. Legally and finally." I paid the check with the money I had saved from my restoration business and a small loan from the local credit union. It wasn't $3 million, but it was enough. I drove home. The rain stopped as I pulled into the driveway. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light on the house. It needed painting. The porch needed repairs. The garden was still recovering from the bulldozer tracks. But it was mine. I walked to the south ridge. The fallen oak tree was still there. I hadn't moved it. Instead, I had started a new project. I brought my tools to the ridge every evening after work. I sat with the fallen giant. I didn't see it as dead wood. I saw it as raw material. I saw the potential in the grain. Over the course of a year, I carved the trunk. I didn't cut it up for firewood. I smoothed it. I shaped it. I carved it into a long winding bench that followed the curve of the ridge. I carved intricate patterns of vines and roses into the backrest. I carved the names of my mother and father. And at the very end I carved a small bird taking flight. I planted the sapling I had found that day. It was growing strong now, fed by the decaying roots of its ancestor. It was a symbol of resilience. Life coming from death. One evening I sat on the bench watching the sunset over the lake. My hands were rougher than ever. My bank account was modest. I drove an old truck. I wore work boots. By Justin's standards, I was a peasant. I was a failure. But as I watched the eagles circling the thermals above the ridge, I felt rich. I had my roots deep in the soil. I had my history. And I had my integrity. Justin had chased wings. He wanted to fly high above everyone else, to look down on the world. But he forgot that wings without roots are just feathers in the wind. He had flown too close to the sun and he had fallen. I picked up a piece of the oak bark from the ground. It was rough and weathered. It had survived storms. It had survived droughts. And it had survived my brother. I realized then that the house wasn't the trap. The greed was the trap. The house was the anchor. It held me steady when the world tried to wash me away. I often think about that day. The day the bulldozer stopped. The day I realized I was stronger than I thought. We often underestimate ourselves. We think we need to be loud to be heard. We think we need to be rich to be powerful. But sometimes power is just standing your ground when everyone else is telling you to move. Sometimes power is just saying no. If you have watched this far, thank you. Maybe you are the quiet one in your family. Maybe you are the one who stays behind to take care of things while others leave. Maybe you feel like your sacrifices are invisible. I want you to know that they are not. Your roots matter. Your loyalty matters. Do not let anyone tell you that kindness is weakness. Do not let anyone bulldoze your boundaries. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find this channel. If you believe that justice was served, leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you know someone who is fighting to protect their legacy, share this video with them. Remind them that even the biggest machines can be stopped by a single piece of paper and a whole lot of courage. Until next time, keep your roots deep and your head high.